Hello, my name is Rahul Mitra. I am an associate professor at Wayne State University, and you can email me at rahul.mitra@wayne.edu and find me on Twitter at Rahul Mitra. This is the fifth installment of my YouTube webinar series on research training and professional development, and the topic for today is how to write an abstract. And if you're wondering why abstract is in scare quotes, you'll soon figure out why. So you know what your paper does, right? So I'm assuming that at this point of time your coursework, you figured out what you want to do in your paper. You figured out the research that you are going to include in your literature review and your theory, as well as the research that you are actually going to be doing in terms of your analysis and your method. But your instructor tells you that you also need to include an abstract at the start of your paper. And you're not quite sure what an abstract really means or how it should be structured. So a very helpful tip is figuring out what an abstract is versus what it is not, right? So what is it not? It's not an introduction. It's not an introduction about what your paper is going to be or what you hope your paper is going to accomplish. It's generally not even included in the main body of the scholarly paper. It actually occupies a separate space on its own. And so this is why you actually have the scare quotes at the start of your on the cover page of this webinar session. It's actually not supposed to be abstract at all. It's not supposed to be vague. It's not supposed to be ambiguous. It's actually supposed to be really, really concrete. And finally, it's not supposed to be a mini essay. So you sort of have to strike a good balance between being informative and concrete, but then also not being overly detailed. So there are some guidelines here, though, for you. First of all, you should try to think about your abstract as a summary. That's probably going to be very helpful. Just as in a summary, you sort of have to go over everything that is supposed to be in your main paper. You similarly have to do the same thing here for your abstract. You should keep it within 100 to 250 words, and it should cover the main points of your paper. It should appear on its own page at the start of your paper, and it should be followed by about 4 to 5 keywords that really define what the scholarly paper is going to be about. So it needs to provide a quick but thorough and pretty concrete understanding of what you do in your paper, so that if a reviewer or a reader comes across your abstract, just by reading those short 100 to 250 words, they should be able to figure out what your paper is about and what you actually do, and more importantly, what you actually find out, what you discover through your research in the paper prior to reading the paper itself. So what are some good components of this mini-me version of your abstract, of your paper? 5 major components of your abstract. So first of all, it needs to go over what the problem is that you actually studied, or what your object of study is. It needs to go over the theory or the literature review, your method, your key findings, and finally your conclusion and your main implications of your abstract. So like I said, it really is a mini-me or a small summary of your entire paper. Let's go over some examples to really illustrate how this plays out in practice. So on the left-hand side right here, you've got an image which I downloaded from the Purdue University Online Writing Lab website. And this basically shows you how the APA style, or the American Psychological Association 7.0 version, really wants you to write or structure an abstract on Microsoft Word. So you've got it on its own separate page. You've got something not more than 100 and 250 words. You've got a set of keywords right below or following your abstract. And you see the idea is that after this abstract page, that's when you start the main body of your research paper. So normally the abstract page appears on page 2 of your research paper. Page 1 is your title page 2 is your abstract, and the body of your paper starts from page 3. On the right-hand side, I'm going to show you through some examples of my own work, research papers, how those 5 key components of an abstract play out in real life. Now, key thing to remember is that those 5 components, object of study, literature or theory, method, findings, and statement of implications, don't necessarily always have to be in this strict order. You can play around with the order a little bit depending on the topic of your work or how you want to address your work, or maybe even the journal outlet, but they should all be somehow there in your 100 to 250 words. So as an example, from this paper of mine from 2018, I begin saying that this study advances a theoretical framework of sustainable organizing grounded in the communicative practices of key organizational actors. I situate this study in the enactment of natural resource management, or NRM, in the US Arctic, drawing on qualitative fieldwork and in-depth interviews. So in this first 2 sentences, I basically talked about the object of study, I referred a little bit to the theory, and I did talk a little bit about the method as well, in-depth interviews. The following sentence, I continue by talking a little bit more about the theory. The theoretical framework hinges on 4 iterative sensitizing concepts: stakeholder embeddedness in local global ecologies, constitutive role of D&D discourse, rhetoric practice tensions, and systemic risk resilience that guided data analysis. This sentence basically was important because, again, it provides a lot more detail about what was guiding my data analysis, as well as the some of more details on the theory part of the research. The reason that I opted for a somewhat mixed abstract writing style for this particular paper was because this paper really tries to develop a new theoretical framework. So although I start with some broad theoretical overview at the start, a really important contribution of this paper was fleshing out those theoretical connections and interconnections in more detail. So I continue. Findings reveal that participants communicatively constituted NRM in terms of structural challenges and best practices. NRM structural challenges were rooted in discursive closure of key perspectives through past events, routinization and design, othering of important stakeholders, and framing institutional tension as conflict. That sentence right there basically summarizes a lot of the important findings that I found from the research. I continue. Nevertheless, participants emphasized key decision-making, relationship building, and risk managing clusters that enabled NRM best practices benefiting both human and natural stakeholders. Again, basically continued and finished up discussing the major findings from my paper. The last sentence you'll see over here is basically a statement saying why this paper was important and what some of the major implications from this research might be. The empirical study thus extends the proposed theoretical framework by demonstrating context-specific practices that enact sustainable organizing. So you see, you still have all 5 of those major components: object of study, theory and literature review, method, findings, and statement of impact or conclusion. Another example, I'll leave this up here for you guys to see for a while. This is a paper that I developed with a student of mine, and we really looked at religious disengagement and stigma management by African American young adults. The clear order, the specific order of the sentences differs a little bit from the first abstract you saw, but as you read this in a little bit more detail, I think you will find that you still have those 5 key components still there, still follow within that 100 to 250 word setup, and that's pretty much what an abstract should look like. So I hope this was helpful, and please take some time to read the abstract. But other than that, you have a great day.